ka na! Ang tagal na natin hindi nagkita.
Oo nga eh. Wala, ganoon. Just like everybody else, nakakulong sa bahay.
Yeah. At least you had time to finish this. Is this book ba just recently published or
Oh,
this was your dissertation, di ba?
Yeah, actually, kaka-publish ko lang. So, kailangan ko nga ng na more than sales, kailangan ko ng mga book reviewers. So, kung may mga gusto pumunta sa Amazon at mag-review ng libro, paki-review naman kasi yun para lang to get the ball rolling, di ba?
Yes.
So, actually, wala kasi akong plan na mag-release ng book.
Okay.
Well, as you know, di ba, magkasama tayo, engineering tayo eh. So, ang undergrad ko was engineering. So, nakakuha ko ng license and nag-masters pa ako in engineering. But in 2011, parang na-realize ko, mahilig kasi ako mag-aral eh. Hindi naman ako magaling na student. I mean, hindi ako top student or whatever. But I can honestly say na interested ako sa pag-aaral.
Oo.
So, naghahanap ako ng something extra to do. Although, syempre, my work, actually, napapractice ko rin yung engineering ko kasi nagha-housing kami, tapos may businesses and all of that. Pero, parang hinahanap ko yung intellectual stimulation, yung classroom environment.
Yes.
So, bumalik ako ng school.
Okay.
Nag-aaral ako ng psychology.
Oo nga, why psychology? From engineering to psychology?
Malayo. Ako lang ata yung engineer na psychologist eh. Actually, to be honest, hindi ko naman talaga passion yung engineering. But I come from a family of architects and engineers. So, ang expectation talaga sa amin growing up was lahat kami magiging licensed architect or engineer. So actually, yun lang yung choice ko. Actually, I could have become an architect or I could have become a civil engineer. So, even from the time of my grandparents, mga kapatid ng tatay ko, may isang doctor but everybody else is an engineer or architect. So, yun talaga yung family culture namin. I was very, very poor in math. High school, sobrang poor talaga in math. Ang subjects na okay ako was English, mga creative writing, things like that. So, I was not a natural engineer. That's why when we were in college, sobrang nag-struggle talaga ako sa academics ko. Pero masipag ako mag-aral I was never a lazy student. Pero hindi talaga siya natural sa akin.
Okay.
So, when I had to study again, wala na akong requirements. I said, what am I really interested in? So I picked psychology. So I studied it for 8 years. It was a straight to PhD program because I had to start with Psych 101 with freshmen. Kasi wala talaga akong academic background in that. So natapos ko siya and then I wrote a dissertation as a final requirement. Wala akong plan na i-release yun. It was already a complete book but written in academic language. So sabi ko during lockdown, hindi kasi ako sanay na walang ginagawa. I'm used to being very busy. So parang medyo naki-crazy ako dito sa bahay. I was trying really to just find something to become productive. So the reason that I converted my academic work into a public work was purely for my own sanity. It was not written to really make a profit. Of course, if I can sell and make a profit, why not? But hindi yun yung primary intention. Yung primary intention is, sabi ko kasi, I worked on this for so long. Actually, parang culmination of 8 years of study siya in a way.
Yes.
And only 5 people have read it. Yung panelists ko sa UP. So parang sabi ko, sayang naman. Diba? Parang sa haba-haba ng inupo ko dito sa upuan na to just to write this book. If I can get 5 more people to read it, then I would have already succeeded. Kasi na-double ko na yung
100% na.
100% na ako. Diba? So that was really the impetus behind this. No? It was really not profit generating at the onset. Sabi ko, uh, what can I do with my time? Because I have so much time. I tried na, nung una, nag-try ako mag-Netflix, watch a series or two. Hindi ko talaga,
Oo.
hindi ko kaya. Hindi ako nag-enjoy.
Oo.
Para after my second series, sabi ko, ayoko ng ganito. hindi, hindi, hindi okay sa akin. Sabi ko, mamamatay ako nitong Netflix na to. Don't get me wrong. Siguro
Oo.
kasi hindi rin talaga ako nasanay na babad sa sa television.
Yes.
Sanay ako na maraming ginagawa. Ganun ako ever since before. Parang busy talaga ako. So hinahanap ko siya.
Oo.
And actually to the point where so I finished this book. I'm about 60% done with a second book actually now.
Wow.
Kasi parang meron na akong writing schedule. I was writing 8 hours a day minimum to edit my book. So
Oo.
sabi ko, may routine na ako and my restaurants are opening on the 16th. Wala
Yes.
naman ako. What am I gonna do from now till the 16th? Mahabang panahon pa yun. I have very competent managers that are actually taking care of, making sure na DTI guidelines are followed, etc.,
Oo.
etc. Actually, ang dami namin, di ba? To do
Oo.
something just very basic. Sabi ko, hindi na ako makikugulo sa kanila, di ba? Para just send me photos, ito yung guidelines, o open tayo sa 16, tapos tingnan
Oo.
natin. Parang ganun na lang. Sabi ko, what do you need me for? There's nothing for me to do there.
Oo.
So,
Okay.
nagsulat ako ng pangalawang book.
Okay, Lex. Let's
Yes.
talk about the first book first. And I know I'm really interested. Some people would be interested with it. Let's start.
Sure. Yes.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for talking to us. Thank you for talking to us. All right. Good afternoon. If you're watching this in the replay or watching it live today, you can join the discussion by putting your questions in the comments. And we're talking to our good friend, a college friend actually in engineering, in DLSU, Lex Ledesma. And from an engineering course to an engineering master's to psychology. And actually, just to share some interesting facts, I actually already know that Lex has been going to Bilibid prison. And I know that he actually learns a lot from those visits. And I've always wondering what did he get out of it, etc. And now he finally finished publishing his book in Amazon, and maybe I'll share with you the what it looks like. So it's called Finding Freedom Inside. And we're talking today, this afternoon, with Lex Ledesma about the Finding Freedom Inside, and maybe what were the learnings from those visits in the prison. So good afternoon.
Hi, good
Mr.
afternoon.
Ledesma.
Kamusta?
Kamusta?
Okay,
And
very good.
yeah, and no, I'm really interested. Ever since you posted that Facebook post on visiting the prison, you've shared with us how paano ka naging from engineering to psychology. But how did it start? This visiting prisoners, was it just like an NGO nonprofit type of thing? It started, and then you got interested in learning from them. Can you share with us?
Actually, so it's super random. It started because my sister was looking to buy Christmas gifts. My older sister was looking to buy Christmas gifts, and she wanted to buy Christmas gifts with a social purpose. So she went to the prison because she knew that in New Bilibid prison, the inmates were making Christmas gifts to sell. So there was no intention for me to visit this prison regularly. There was no intention of me going there and helping out. That was not in the cards at all. It was just supposedly a one-time visit to the
Mhm.
prison, and then that was it. My sister was gonna buy Christmas gifts to give away, and she wanted to help. And that was the whole idea. There was nothing. Uh, it was not supposed to be a 10-year deal. It was supposed
Okay.
to be a one-time deal.
So, um, can you describe going to the prison, and what do you usually do when you visit?
Well, the first time, actually, it's weird because when I went to the prison the first time, I was really touched. I was moved by the people inside. So I was moved in a way that I could not really explain rationally. I was moved emotionally by the experience of the people there. And so that's actually why I kept going back. It was not because I'm trying to be a hero or help them out. Definitely, I think I've been able to help, but they have been able to help me in so many ways also dealing with the people there. I think whenever people are struggling and in pain, uh, there's something to learn. And so that was my experience in prison. And I started going to prison 2010.
Mm-hmm.
In 2011, I started a PhD, which I completed in 2019 after 8 years. And
Okay.
so my doctorate and my prison visits really helped each other out because I was learning regularly by going to UP Diliman 3-4 times a week, and I was going to New Bilibid Prison 1-2 times a week and getting two different perspectives on humanity, life, stress management, and everything else that has to do with the human experience.
Okay. Now, so can you share with us some of the insights you've shared in the book about what you learned during those visits?
Yeah, I think um, what I've seen, because basically my book is about the eight most exemplary prisoners. So these are inmates that have been voted by prison guards and prison and other fellow inmates, other prisoners, to be the most reformed or the most ideal within that very vicious environment. So I surveyed the people there. And the reason I did this was because I had met so many people that had really turned their lives around inside. Not so many, but some. So I was so curious because these are people who have done terrible crimes, but it seems like they've really made a change for the better and have been able to live in this very difficult circumstance and yet be so hopeful, so happy. So it was really a mystery for me.
Mm-hmm.
My question to myself was, and my question wasn't even as a psychologist or as a researcher or as a scientist. My question was as a human being. He said, how can this be? How can they live in these conditions and be so peaceful and happy? You're confined in a very small space. Your food is terrible. You have zero rights. Nobody listens to you. There's a lot of violence and other negative things going on, and yet there are some people that are really happy and okay. So I
Mm-hmm.
was questioning myself actually, and saying, hey, maybe ako yung may problema, baka ako yung may maling ginagawa kasi how come these guys are supposedly uneducated when it comes to academic matters, um, definitely underprivileged in terms of financial matters, had very poor parenting, which is common, and then almost all of them have had a history of substance abuse, whether it be drugs or for the younger guys, generally shabu. For
Mm-hmm.
the older guys, generally alcohol, because they're saying in their day, there was really no drugs other than alcohol and marijuana. So those were
Mm-hmm.
just the two choices. So how did they go from that to where they are today? That was really a big question in my mind.
Okay. And ano ba? What's the common denominator for those that reformed?
Well, I think number one, if you ask them,
Mm-mm.
they all say that they have found God in prison and been able to reform and change their lives because of their spiritual practice. The interesting thing though is when I interviewed my eight, they are not all from the same religion. And when I went
Ah,
into this study, I didn't have a preconceived notion about what your findings are because as a
oo.
researcher, you're supposed to go in and honor the stories, honor the narratives.
Oh.
So I had Catholics, I had Protestants of different kinds, and then Iglesia ni Cristo members. I had Muslim members. So all coming from different churches, and yet they felt that um, when they found a genuine relationship with God as they understood it, it really helped them to change. And
Okay.
then once they did that, they also lived reformed, upright lives inside. So they kept themselves very busy, very productive, not necessarily to make money, but in order to live lives that have meaning and they're very fruitful. So this was something that I saw. And actually, psychologically, that makes a lot of sense. Eh. In
Oh.
fact, there's a whole branch of psychology called behaviorism. And the
Mm-hmm.
idea behind behaviorism is if you monitor a person's behavior and change the behavior, then the emotions, the attitudes, the cognitions, which are the thought processes, also change. So the idea is change behavior first. You don't have to change the what the person is thinking or feeling, and
Oh.
eventually the thoughts and the feelings and the attitudes will align with the behavior as opposed to the other way around. Because people have a conception that you change the person's thoughts and attitudes first, and then the behavior will follow.
Mm-mm.
But what the
Oh.
behaviorists believe is, yes, that works. That's one option. But if you go the opposite direction, by changing the behavior, the thoughts and the attitudes will also change. So there's a lot of statistics, experiments, studies along this line,
Mm-hmm.
where people, in fact, sometimes you're not even aware that your attitudes are changing. Like there was a study made by a famous study made by a guy named Fritz Strack, and
Mm-hmm.
he got a pen, a ball pen, and he
Mm-hmm.
gave it to people, and he forced them, well, experimented and told them, you either hold the pen between your nose and your upper lip, which
Mm-hmm.
induces a frown, or you hold the pen in between your teeth, which induces a smile. Obviously, you're not really frowning, nor are you really smiling. You're not feeling any emotion. And they were asked to do this. And what they saw was those that were forced to frown for a long period of time became more depressed. And the ones who were forced to smile for a long period of time became less depressed. So
Mm. Interesting.
somebody who's depressed, for example, one therapy will be to let them bite on a pencil or a ball pen for an hour a day while they watch TV. They don't even have to think about what they're doing, but by activating your smiling or your frowning muscles, it sends signals to your body as to what your emotions are,
Mm-mm.
even if you're not processing it intellectually. So these are things that are validated in my study somehow because after finding God, they said, I'm not going to do drugs anymore. I'm not going to drink anymore. I'm not going to do what the other inmates are doing, which is just
Mm-hmm.
living more criminal lives inside the prison because our prison has one prison guard for every 300 prisoners. Can you imagine? One guard for 300 prisoners. So if you expect any reform to happen in that environment, first of all, the guard is not even a psychologist. I think they have one licensed psychiatrist for
Uh-huh.
15,000 inmates. So how can how can legitimate reform happen with this type of because of course our government is not wealthy. The
Oo.
poorest of the poor is yung bilanggo, 'di ba? Yun yung talagang
Yes.
wala, walang-wala yun. So any limited funding does not go to prisoner reform because
Oo.
in the minds of most lawmakers and the executive branches, these are the people that are the worst, the criminals. So let them rot in jail, and as long as they don't bother anybody on the outside, reforming them is not really a priority. But
Oo.
having lived inside for a long time as a volunteer, seen their lifestyle, you'll see that many of the issues inside the jail are systemic. Less than 1% of inmates have college degrees. But if you look at total crime committed in the Philippines, surely not less, I mean, it doesn't make sense that if you get 100 crimes, that less than 1% of those have college degrees. So in
Oo.
other words, the inmate population is overrepresenting the people who do not have an ability to defend themselves. Many people get put in jail because they have a petty crime and they
Mhm.
cannot pay bail. So if you cannot pay bail, then tuloy-tuloy na yung proseso until you get convicted with finality. But most people who have regular jobs can come up with their 10,000 peso bail, which is the average bail. It's not that
Mhm.
big an amount for somebody with a job. But even 10,000 pesos is impossible for some of these people. So they end up going straight into New Bilibid prison after, a year or two or five of a criminal trial.
Pero may question ako. But before that, may mga nag-hi sa atin. Oh, Echo
Yes.
Batch. Uya!
Oy.
Of course. Si Rach. Shaila.
Hi.
And then, of course, Raymond Magdaluyo Asesa.
Kamusta, kamusta?
So, pero ang question ko, Lex, di ba, sometimes they say that the environment influences what you do, and syempre the environment in Bilibid prison is nothing, di ba? So, but how did they change? I know you said they found God, but was that enough to make them change despite their environment in the Bilibid prison?
Actually, if you read my book, some of it is very difficult to believe. And in fact, when I was doing the interviews, I was thinking to myself, imposible to. As a person, of course,
Oo.
when you're interviewing, you're not supposed to show the person that you're shocked. But some of what they say, I said, "Parang this is impossible." I saw two types of change. There was incremental change, which is the way most people see change, meaning you get better, then you get worse, you get better, you get worse, and eventually you reach your goal. So about half of the respondents changed slowly over time. So they
Okay.
set a goal, they fail at it, they set a goal, they fail at it. But what
Okay.
was surprising to me was the ones who changed overnight, instantly. For example, I had one inmate who was convicted, I think, at 30 years old, but began as a shabu addict at 15 years old. So, meaning, half of his life, he was doing drugs every single day to the
Wow.
point that he was a drug dealer, drug pusher, crazy. He was had a crazy life.
Mm-mm.
When he was in prison, he was going to meet his wife who was visiting.
Okay.
His wife was bringing him drugs. Okay. As he was walking to the wife to the visiting area, he heard a voice tell him, itigil mo na yan, wala kang mapapala dyan. So of course, what is the logical conclusion? This is obviously an auditory hallucination. Natural,
Okay.
di ba? I mean, the guy has done drugs for 15 years. What do you expect? Of course, he's hearing
Okay.
voices. That's
Oo.
not unusual for a shabu addict. It's not unusual to hear voices. Okay.
Okay.
And then he gets down on his knees. This is his claim. Okay. He
Oh,
gets down on his knees there and he starts to pray.
okay.
And he said, looks around, goes, what's that? And he said, God spoke to me. So he doesn't visit his wife anymore with the drugs. But before the visiting hour was over, he runs to his wife, his actually live-in partner, and he tells the wife, magpakasal ka na lang sa ibang lalaki. If you're gonna keep doing drugs, leave me, find another man.
Huh?
And then he went back in. Okay, so I was thinking to myself, okay, this is an interesting, strange story. But now it's been more than 5 years already, and he not only stopped doing drugs inside, He also stopped smoking. He stopped hanging out with all the bad people. He started to devote his entire life to drug reformation. So, with a church group, he was trying to get other people to reform from drugs. He did not go through any therapy, any drug rehab. He
Mm-hmm.
heard a voice and he stopped doing drugs, he stopped smoking, he stopped drinking, he stopped doing all the bad things. So the first thing I did was I talked to the prison guards and I
Okay.
talked to his gang leaders that see him every day. And I talked to my many inmate friends to ask them, totoo ba yan? Kasi if you're doing crazy things inside prison and you're living in a
Mm-hmm.
room with 30 other people, you cannot hide it. You cannot. There's no
Mm.
way. Everybody knows everything about everybody.
Oo.
It's a small environment na puro chismoso. Puro lalaking chismoso. All they do is talk about each other. Of course,
Yes.
there's no other stimulus. The stimulus is each other. Everybody knows everybody's story. If you're doing drugs, drinking, hanging out with the wrong crowd in New Bilibid prison, the prison guards, the prisoners, the everybody knows about it. So they are attesting to the strange story of this guy. That hindi, nagbago talaga yan. Nung una, yung mga barkada was saying, wala, babalik yan, babalik yan.
Oo. Yes.
Hindi, imposible, imposible. Kasi kilala ko yan, ganyan, ganyan. Pero it's been all this time, he's still the same. So what he's telling me is, actually, I also thought it was drugs. But my evidence that it was God and not drugs is the fact that I've been clean for so long.
Oo,
And
galing, ah.
that's my evidence. Sabi niya, I also wouldn't believe what I'm saying. He himself admits it. Because this
Oo.
is a very improbable story. I know that. I know, sir, you don't believe me. But when I checked it out, parang you think, wow, this is incredible. This is good stuff. This is good to write about. So that's
Oo.
why I was writing about it. I said, well, I'll just tell you what I heard. I'm not necessarily saying it's true or not, but
Mhm.
I'm part of my method was not to make judgments on what I'm hearing, but to honor the story, to honor the life, the narrative, especially of a marginalized person like this, to give them a voice. So that was really the intention of my book.
Galing, ah. Um, and I think are the are the stories or the learnings you'll get from the book applicable to what happened in our quarantine period?
Yeah, for sure. Because see, the average time that my exemplars have been in prison is about more than 20 years. So they have been living in these conditions, some of them for 35 years already. If you look at it, 36 years. And yet they're still so hopeful despite being so confined and controlled. So I was thinking, there definitely now that we are all confined somehow. Of course, not our confinement is not even 1% of their confinement for obvious reasons. No, for obvious
Uh,
reasons. But I think by looking at what they're doing inside and how some of them are not just coping but thriving, I think it's something that everybody can really learn from because there are there are certain patterns of behavior of the exemplar inmates. See, most people inside prison, they just really sit around, gamble or watch TV for
mhm.
90% of their free time. There's a TV in every dorm and they just fight over what's going to be playing on the television. Or they gamble with cards, they play pusoy dos or whatever,
Oo.
or or they just hang out and talk to each other. They don't really do anything. But these guys, some of my exemplars work 10 hours a day doing different productive things. Helping in the church, helping in the hospital. They don't get paid to help in the hospital. So why are they helping in the hospital? They're volunteering to do this or that. So they're really keeping busy doing whatever good things they can inside.
Galing ah. So, kamusta sila during the COVID times pala? That prison?
Wow, we have more than 500 confirmed COVID positive in You Believe It prison alone. And then on top of that, there's about 1,000 that have been separated that baka positive then.
Oo.
So it's huge because the conditions are terrible. It's overpopulated 300% from the design capacity of the prison. So there's no social distancing possible. So what they had to do was they had to create a whole new area now, and they've separated those inmates. So it's crazy. I'm very much in touch with the priests that are have been there for the longest time.
Oo.
So
Until now.
I'm very much in touch with them because we've had to create drives in order to help feed the people who were separated, because you cannot feed potentially coronavirus positive patients prison food. The sustenance there is not enough for them to get well,
Oo
because
nga.
you need food nutrition in order to get out of this coronavirus. Otherwise, your possibility of dying is higher. So, it's a challenge, but that's how it is.
Grabe, no? So, how do they, maybe can you share, how can they get this book?
Yeah, so the book is available on Amazon. So there's an
Mhm.
ebook for $5, and then there's a paperback book. Although with a paperback, obviously the shipping is more expensive than the book itself, but because it's in the US. Amazon is a print on demand service. So meaning when there's an order, that's the only time they actually print the books,
Oo.
and that's why I decided to self publish in this way. Because I guess I was also thinking I don't know what the mass market potential of my book is, given it's about inmates, and I don't expect everybody to think that they can learn from inmates. I think the general perspective is that inmates are different from me. I have nothing in common with them, so what do I really have to learn from them? The only reason I think otherwise is because I've been going there for a decade, and so I know these inmates. They're not theoretical to me. I know them as people, and I've been enriched by the experience. And so I decided to go with the Amazon self-publishing platform because I feel that if somebody's interested, then we'll print a book. If they're not interested, then that's okay. But aside from the purchases, what would help me also is if you review the book on Amazon,
Mhm.
put comments there. Of course, don't say my name or that I told you, obviously, but that would help to drive traffic to the book if people start commenting on it and talking about it.
Yes, I am excited to read it. So, ano to, stories of 8 people, and then,
Yeah.
uh, okay.
I, it, I mean, first it looks at, I had certain criteria. So one of the criteria, for example, is that you have to have admitted your crime. So when you're
Uh,
inside prison, if you're a child rapist or a rapist and you admit your crime, you're actually putting your life in danger, because all other inmates are also parents. And they won't necessarily rape you, but you will definitely be bullied, marginalized, etc.
mm-mm.
So for somebody, and this is what happened in my book, to say, yes, I committed the crime of rape, and I'm now paying the price for it and trying to reform myself, really shows that they have changed to the point that they're willing to accept potential retribution from their peers just because they want to do the right thing. So that's one of my criteria. The other criteria was anybody who I had known for the whole time I have been in prison was not part of the book, because I did not want my past experiences with them to bias my present interview. So I thought
Mm.
I wanted a new person, somebody who I didn't know personally, and I had other criteria. So I also discussed how I got the surveys from the prison guards to ask them who here is worth interviewing, and then I would validate that with the inmates, or I would get names from the inmates and validate it with the prison guards. Only when the guards and the inmates agreed that this is a person who is really an exemplar, maayos to na tao, hindi yan nagdodroga, hindi yan violent, and I also excluded those that were wealthy or that
Mm-hmm.
were gang leaders, because I figured I wanted the story of a regular person, not some highly educated, very powerful person, because that wouldn't be extraordinary. I
Oo.
wanted something that was, just a regular guy on the not anybody special, but who was able to turn his life around. So there were very specific things I was looking for, and then I did a lot of interviews. I spent many hours over many months going back and chatting with them and getting their stories, and then trying to find commonalities among the eight, trying to find what works for everybody, and also looking at what are some of the differences are, like the change patterns, the psychological frame that each one is using, so the coping mechanisms of each person. So there's a little bit of a psychology slant on it, obviously, because it had to be presented, but much of the boring stuff that only academics like to read, I've removed completely and only left in the things which I think would be useful to a non-academic.
Okay. And to end this presentation, to
Oh,
this discussion, I think most people would ask, really, can we learn anything from the prisoners?
yes. Well, I think that it would be very arrogant to see any other person in this world and think, I cannot learn anything from this person. Anybody, regardless of who that person is. I think that if you have a perspective that you can learn from everybody, then your life will be a life of learning. That until death, when you're 85 years old, you can see a 10-year-old and say, I can learn from you. But most especially, what bonds all prisoners together is they are dealing with and have dealt with great amounts of pain. So while you can focus on the bad things that they've done, you can also focus on their current and present experience. Number one, they are paying for their crimes because they're in prison. So they're doing their time for the crime that they've committed. Number two, some of the ones that are experiencing great pain seem to have found a way to surpass or overcome that pain. So just like the monk who spends 100 years in a cave or sits under a tree to find enlightenment, these are some people that, in my personal and objective opinion, have found a piece of that enlightenment. And maybe they had to go through the crime and the pain and the struggle in order to find this at the end of their tunnel. Because if they maybe just led regular lives, they wouldn't have been forced to really introspect and find something inside themselves that's worth living for, despite being in this environment. So I think life is going to be full of pain, not just through coronavirus, but just because that's the nature of life itself. So for anybody who's experiencing hardship, why not look to another human being that's surpassing and overcoming similar hardship in order to learn from? So I think that like I said, I went to prison one time to buy Christmas gifts, and I'm still there a decade later. So obviously, I feel on a personal level that I've learned more about life and how to deal with it inside New Bilibid prison than I have taking a doctorate and becoming a PhD in UP Diliman. So on my personal life, I don't go there to help them. I go there because it's really just become a part of my life and a very good way to help myself in order to improve day in and day out and make sense of all the craziness that's going on. So definitely you can learn from inmates just like you can learn from children and you can learn from anybody else, especially from somebody who has overcome a lot of hardship in their life.
All right. Thank you. And thank you for sharing the book, no? Finally, I know a lot of people are interested for this type of story. You don't know, it might be a movie someday also.
Maybe.
Maybe can we have a photo? Let's have a photo now.
All
Okay.
right.
All right. One, two. One more, safety lang. Okay.
Sige.
Andali, yung isang layout. Alright. Let's have one more. One, two. All right. Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah.
Lex. Really quite interesting. And salamat for sharing it. And I'm sure a lot of people would, if you're watching this in replay, go to Amazon and check out the book and Finding Freedom Inside. Thank you,
Thank
Lex.
you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. And we're here talking to Steve. Thank you for Lex!
Salamat.
Kamusta?
Okay
So,
na? Off-air na tayo? Off-air na
hindi,
tayo?
hindi, pero may question ako sa'yo. So, how's your school pala?
Okay
You're still
naman.
running the school, di ba?
Yeah. Actually, dalawa yon. One is fashion and interior design, yung
Oo.
sofa. And then I have the entrepreneurship, which is the one school. So parang dalawa yung I'm involved with two schools.
Also, what are you doing? What's the
Online ngayon. Everybody is online format. Pero
and it
mahirap.
works? It works?
It's not the same. It's not as good. It's not as good because it's just I guess it's a learning curve. Both teachers and students aren't used to it. And this doesn't just go for my schools. This goes for any online program because it's new. So the learning curve is very steep. So nandun
Okay.
kami ngayon. Wala. There's no choice. It's just dealing with this. But there's a lot of fears also in the education business because a lot of the parents are OFWs.
Oo, yes.
So baka yung affordability ng mga parents is also not there. I mean, hindi naman yan puro rich kids, di ba? I mean, a lot of them have unstable income din. So, it is what it is. What can you do?
Pero ang galing, no? The Filipino entrepreneurs are still fighting, no? All of them. Although we have stories na people closing down. But,
Pero mahirap. Like, for example, ang prediction with the restaurant business is that 50% of all restaurants will close. The key variable is really rent.
mhm.
Kasi rent is a fixed expense. If you have landlords that are willing to give you kahit a 50% discount,
Oo.
maybe you can break even. Maybe you can break even and pay your people. But how many landlords are willing to take a 50% hit on their property? Diba? So these are
Are they giving?
well, actually during ECQ, MECQ, very generous ang landlords. But after that, wala pang commitment for a long term. I mean, they understand what's happening, but for after that, I don't know if they'll be willing to do that,
To
diba?
extend, no?
Or to give you that much of a break because even at a 50% rent, you still might not even break even because you have you can only have 50% occupancy and take out on delivery still at this point, even that it's increased, will never approximate your old sales. I mean, we yung market ng whistle stop traditionally
Mhm.
was really inuman ng call center agents. So
Oo.
actually, it was not really, they're not really there for the food or the experience. They're there because it's their go-to bar na
Oo.
parang hangout nila yon.
Oo.
Hindi pwedeng social distancing. They're not there. Parang nobody knew Whistle Stop kasi sobrang sarap ng pagkain. Pero tambayan siya.
Oo.
So,
O, so paano? Paano mo,
sa tambayan kasi, hindi na pwede mag-social distancing kung tambayan, di ba? Kasi tambayan nga maraming tao doon lagi. Our peak hours was breakfast, and breakfast was all inuman.
wow.
Inuman breakfast. When they get out of the call centers, they go there. That's what our market became. It wasn't the old market, pero very loyal clientele yon, di ba? Very
Oo.
loyal clientele kasi they drink after work almost every day and then they eat. So they're looking for value meals. Parang not so discerning yung crowd in terms of food quality. I mean, they're not there for the dining experience. They're
Oo.
there because it's their after work drinking place.
So,
So
anong gagawin nyo?
we'll see. Basta ang sa amin, mag-open kami. Tapos we'll see. Kasi June 16 ang earliest opening date. So, basta sa amin, sabi namin, we'll open and see how it goes. Kasi syempre, marami ring empleyado. So, kawawa naman sila if you don't do anything. Basta sa
Yeah.
amin, sabi namin, it's too early to throw in the towel. Laban muna. Laban tayo. Maybe we can sustain it 6 months at a loss. Or they will try 6 months. Tingnan natin. After 6 months, reassess. Do we stop? Do we move forward? But I don't want to waste any time kasi being stressed out eh. Kasi para sa akin, hindi naman makakatulong yun eh.
Mm,
So,
yes.
that's why on a personal level, I'm keeping busy. I'm creating a new career path for myself as a book writer. Diba?
Oo.
Parang, I can I make a profit doing this or not? I have no idea. But for me, it's worth a try because if it takes me 3 months to write 3 books, I'll put it out there and then see. Kung kumita, de good. Kung hindi kumita, then I'll find something else to do. Parang
Oo.
at least I didn't just sit down. I tried to do something to diversify my portfolio, so to speak, 'di ba? So,
So, last na lang before I let you go. Can you
sure.
give a sneak peek on the second book?
Yeah, it's basically more marketable. It's the name of the book is Conquering the Coronavirus World:
Okay.
How the Top 100 Psychology Experiments Can Help. So I'm about 60. I'll be done with 70% by today. I've written it in the last 8 days. So I've been writing 12 hours a day for the last 8 days because I want to get this book out in the next 3 weeks.
Oo,
Because
tama.
this coronavirus, it has to be current. So
Oo.
I'm writing morning, noon, and night. I even stopped exercising, which is my normal routine, just so that I can write longer. But I'm gonna write a series of 3 books relating psychology and coronavirus. My third book is gonna be um, navigating the challenges of the coronavirus world, how the top 10 modern psychologists can help. So again, not the first is about the 100 experiments, then the next is going to be about the modern psychologists. So these are psychologists that are still alive, active, practicing, and what their thoughts are in the past that can relate to how we deal with coronavirus today. So I'm
Ano
doing
yan? More of personal development or more entrepreneurial yung...
More personal development.
Okay.
So there's a lot of what they call positive psychology, which is looking at your resources, how you can use that and leverage that to fight against your stressors, and things
Oo.
like that. There's a lot of work out there. So I'm doing a 3-book series linking coronavirus and psychology to try to merge that because I studied it. And I'm
Oo.
putting it on Amazon and seeing if I can do a pivot to a new career as an author. So if it works, then I'll just keep writing. If it doesn't work, then I'll pivot to something else. I'm just trying to diversify myself now so that I can adjust to the new normal. So we'll
Oo.
see. We'll see. I'm not claiming that I will succeed at what I'm trying to do, but for me, it's worth a shot. It's
Of
worth a
course,
try.
yeah.
Yeah,
And mental health is actually a big problem during this time. So
absolutely. Absolutely.
and yeah, you know that book would be interesting. How do you battle this? Ano nga, your psychology, inside battling this corona, and this would take longer time, pa, di ba?
Yeah, and the thing is also, I think that as you've been doing for a long time, thought leadership becomes very important. Owning a space in the thought leadership world becomes
Mm-hmm.
very important, especially in a time where movement is limited. So my
Mm-hmm.
idea is, what can I attempt to become a thought leader in? What space can I try to claim so that as movement becomes limited, you can keep producing some thoughts that other people can consume. So this
Mm-hmm.
is where I'm coming from. I said, hey, I studied 8 years. I know how to do this. I like
Yes.
to write. I like to write. So I said, if I can write 3 books in 3 months, I don't lose anything. Actually, my wife, si Chippy, say, you look happier doing this than you do when you're doing your businesses. Parang ano daw ako, high na high daw ako sa
Uh,
umaga. So I said, maybe baka ito na. I mean, you know what? Honestly, Anton, you've known me a long time. Para sa akin
uh,
kasi, change what I can change and accept what I cannot change. That's my perspective. So this is something that I can do. It's for my own wellness and mental health. Whether
Uh-huh.
it can become a good business or not, we will see. But I'm enjoying the journey. So I'll
Okay.
definitely keep riding this train until another train comes along. I don't want
Uh-huh.
to spend time focused on things I cannot control.
Mm-hmm.
We've like, for example, all the employees that we've had, we've been feeding them during this whole time, but we haven't been giving them salary because there's no work. So
Uh-huh.
I keep telling them, basta walang gutom sa atin, that's what we can promise. We just make sure that everybody has some food. Maybe it's not the best food, but you and your kids have something to eat. When we open, we will try to fight it out. If it fails, then we'll try to find something else, but cross the bridge when we get there. That's
Nice.
kind of how I've been dealing with this coronavirus thing, because you know, thinking about how great our sales were on March 1 isn't going to help me now. And I mean,
Yes.
our sales were fantastic on March 1, but it's not March 1. So I'm not going to be, talking about that now. Doesn't matter. It's irrelevant at this
Mm-mm.
point. I need to find something for, July 1, or August 1, and try to find something that will work for that time.
Wow. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Very
Salamat.
inspiring. I'm trying to write my own book also. I'm actually doing a
Good.
series of book author interviews.
Perfect.
So it was just perfect time to
Okay.
inspire other book authors also out there. Diba? Tama ka. That's the best way to do thought leadership at this time as well.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Ingat, ingat. Bye.
Thanks. Say hi to Chippy, your
Yes,
sister.
yes. Erase as well. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.